I was holding my son's hand in the ICU, his head wrapped in bandages tubes everywhere, when my mom called to ask if I'd picked up the cake for my sister's birthday. That was the moment everything cracked. I'm Rachel, and this is the story of how my son's near-death experience revealed the truth about the people I once called family. Have you ever been forced to choose between your child and your own mother? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your story too. I'm Rachel. Stay with me because this story might be closer to yours than you think. Saturday mornings used to mean slow coffee, the smell of cinnamon toast, and the thud of sneakers on the hardwood floor as Mason chased the dog through the apartment. That morning, at least for the first 27 minutes, was no different. "Mom, can I go ride the trail with Luke and Connor?" Mason asked, breathless helmet already dangling from the handlebars of his battered trek bike. His curls stuck out from under his baseball cap like wild vines. I glanced up from my laptop, my coffee still steaming beside me. "Did you charge your phone?" "Yes. Tracker's on." He rolled his eyes. "Obviously." "Helmet." He held it up. "I'm not 12, you know." "You're exactly 12, I said, standing to kiss his forehead still warm from bed. "And being 12 doesn't mean you're invincible." He grinned as he opened the door, sunlight pouring in like a promise. "Be back before 1. We're making waffles, remember, deal." I called after him just as the door shut. I should have felt peace, but instead I felt that odd maternal twitch, that flutter in the chest you can't quite place until something breaks. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. I turned on some music, something soft. James Taylor, maybe. Then I started folding laundry. Josh's old fire department hoodie had somehow ended up in the bottom of the basket. I held it close, inhaled deeply, and just like that, I was back at the funeral. Standing in a sea of uniforms and bagpipes, Mason, only 5 years old, not understanding why Daddy wasn't coming home. The knock on the door that day had changed everything, but this day, it was the ringing. At first I didn't answer. Unknown number. Portland area code. I figured it was spam. Then something made me pick up. "Is this Rachel Carter?" A woman asked, calm but brisk. "Yes, this is EMT Sarah with Portland General. We have your son Mason Carter. He's been involved in an accident. He's stable but critical. He's en route to the ER now. We need you to come as soon as possible." My knees buckled. The room spun in slow motion. "What happened? Is he? He was struck by a vehicle while biking. He has head trauma, possible internal injuries. I'll have someone meet you at emergency reception. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember the drive. I must have hit every red light between Hawthorne and Burnside, and I must have broken every law that Josh once enforced with honor." But all I could see was Mason's face scrunched with laughter as he tried to flip a pancake last weekend, or the way he still held my hand sometimes when he was half asleep on the couch. "God, please, just let me get to him." I parked crooked outside the ER, slammed the car door shut, and bolted inside. A nurse was waiting. She had a clipboard and kind eyes. "Rachel Carter." "Yes, my son, Mason Carter. He's 12 bike. They've taken him into surgery. He suffered a head injury and some internal bleeding. We're working to stabilize him. Please come this way." I followed her down endless white hallways, the scent of antiseptic and fear thick in the air. My hands shook. My mouth was dry. My heart was a war drum. Finally, they brought me to a family consult room. A different nurse entered, older, more serious. Her name badge read, "Karen Trauma Unit RN. Miss Carter, the next 72 hours will be critical," she said gently, her voice soft but unwavering. "We'll update you as soon as the neurosurgeon can speak with you. Right now he's in good hands. The pediatric ICU team is the best in the state." I nodded numbly, my lips unable to form words. I sat and sat and sat. I could hear the wall clock ticking. That's when my phone buzzed. I grabbed it, hoping it was a doctor, a miracle. Instead, it was my mother, Diane. I didn't answer at first, but then, maybe she'd heard. Maybe the hospital called her too. Maybe she was worried. Maybe finally she'd be the mother I needed. I answered with a shaky voice. "Mom." Her tone was cheerful, almost rehearsed. "Sweetie, I just wanted to remind you to pick up the cake for Lindsay's party tomorrow. We went with carrot instead of chocolate this year. You know how she's watching her figure." I blinked. My heart, already cracked, felt like it splintered right down the middle. "Mom." Mason is in the ICU, I said slowly, each word like gravel in my throat. He was hit by a car. He's in surgery right now. The doctors don't know if he's going to. Well, you should have told me that first. She interrupted, her voice losing none of its brightness. But you can't let this ruin your sister's birthday. She's been planning it for months. Honestly, Rachel, you always do this. You make everything about your drama. I didn't speak. I couldn't. If I had, I might have screamed. You can swing by the bakery on Burnside after visiting the hospital, she added. They close at 5. I ended the call without another word. My hands trembled as I placed the phone face down on the bench beside me. I sat there, in the cold, white quiet, wondering how a mother could hear that and still talk about cake. A few minutes later, a new nurse peeked in. They're moving your son to recovery. You'll be able to see him soon. I stood slowly, and in that moment, I made a quiet promise to myself and to Mason. No one, not even family, would get to decide what mattered more than my son's life ever again. I hadn't slept in, I don't even know how long. 29 hours. 30. Everything inside the ICU moves in slow motion, but your body feels like it's aging in fast forward. My neck ached from leaning over the recliner they'd set up beside Mason's bed. My back screamed with every movement. My eyes burned dry from tears that had stopped coming, or maybe just ran out. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor was the only thing anchoring me. Beep, pause, like a mechanical heartbeat standing in for the real one my son hadn't woken up to. I reached out again, gently running my fingertips along Mason's arm, careful not to disturb the IV line. You remember that time you beat me at Mario Kart 3 times in a row? I whispered, my voice cracking on the third word. I still say you cheated, but I let it slide because your victory dance was hilarious. He didn't respond. Of course he didn't. The ventilator hissed, rising and falling with each forced breath. Machines clicked, buzzed, blinked. But Mason, my boy, just lay there, still pale, lost in a place I couldn't reach. A soft knock on the ICU door broke the silence. It was Nurse Carla again, the one with auburn braids and deep brown eyes that always looked a little too empathetic, like she'd already seen the worst the world could throw at people. You holding up Mama? She asked softly, stepping inside with a styrofoam cup of tea. I tried to smile. Barely. She handed me the tea and sat down across from me, not too close, but close enough to remind me I wasn't entirely alone. I've seen kids like him pull through, Carla said, folding her hands. Not all, but some. And from what I've heard, your boy's a fighter. I looked at Mason. The bruises on his temple had deepened overnight, and the swelling still made him look more like a stranger than my son. But Carla's words were a thread, and I needed something to hold on to. Thanks, I said, voice barely audible, for the tea, and for not pretending like everything's fine. Carla gave a knowing smile. You'd be amazed how many families want sugar-coated lies. But you've been here every minute. That tells me everything I need to know. I nodded, taking a sip. It was too hot, too bitter, but somehow it helped. The moment of quiet was shattered by the buzz of my phone. Voicemail, again. Caller ID Mom. I didn't want to check it, I really didn't. But something in me, some last fragile hope that she'd finally ask if Mason was okay, forced my thumb to press play. Diane's voice chirped through the speaker like a knife dressed in pearls. Rachel, I really need to know if you're still planning to pick up the spinach quiche. The caterer said they can't accommodate the change unless it's confirmed by noon. And sweetheart, if you're not going to be reliable, please just let me know so I can have Lindsay's college roommate take over the gift table. Honestly, it's not that complicated. That was the third voicemail that morning. None of them had mentioned Mason, not once. I deleted it. My hand trembled. Carla saw my expression shift. Family trouble? I gave a breathy laugh, hollow, humorless, something like that. She didn't press. Instead, she reached over, placed her hand over mine for just a second, then stood. Page me if you need anything. And try to nap just 20 minutes can help. I thanked her even though I knew I wouldn't sleep. As soon as she left, I slumped back into the chair, glancing at Mason's hand. His fingers were still curled gently inward. The same fingers that used to smear peanut butter on the fridge, build Lego fortresses on the kitchen floor, and tap on my arm every time a movie got too scary. I could hear my own voice echoing back in my mind, words I barely remembered saying that morning. Don't stay out too long. Not I love you. Not be safe. Just don't stay out too long. That was the last thing I said before he left. And now? Now he might never speak to me again. Tears welled up uninvited, but this time they didn't fall. I wasn't sure if that was strength or just complete emotional shutdown. Another buzz, another voicemail. I didn't even need to listen. I could already imagine what it said. Quiche, cake, balloons, birthday party. Meanwhile, my son's brain was swollen, his spine bruised, his future a question mark. I stood up suddenly dizzy from the motion and walked out of the room. In the hallway, a janitor nodded at me. Another mom stood across the corridor, cradling a toddler wrapped in tubes. We locked eyes for half a second, an unspoken exchange of mutual pain, and then looked away. Back in Mason's room, I sat down again, and just like that, the guilt came pouring in like a tidal wave. What if I was a bad daughter? What if my mother was right? What if this wasn't about choosing Mason over a party, but about always choosing drama over family, but no matter how hard I tried to spin it, no amount of catering or gift tables, no overpriced carrot cakes or signature cocktails could possibly matter right now. I took Mason's hand again, this time firmer. I'm here, I whispered. I'm not going anywhere, because even if the rest of the world thought birthday balloons mattered more, I knew the truth. Mason was the only celebration I needed. I didn't even hear my phone ring. I just felt it buzzing, relentless, vibrating like a warning signal from the pit of my bag. I ignored it the first time, then the second, but by the third, I already knew who it was. I pulled the phone out and stared at the screen. Mom, one missed call, then another, then a text, then another. My thumb hovered over the message icon. A stupid, useless part of me still hoped. Maybe this time she'd ask how Mason was, but hope dies fast in a hospital. I opened the latest one. Rachel, I've just about had it. Lindsay's dinner is tomorrow, and you promised to help with the seating chart. If you don't show up, or at least act like you care, don't expect anything from us again. And I mean it. No, how's Mason know are you eating, or are you okay? Just logistics, deadlines, threats dressed in propriety. A mother's love apparently came with a clock. I put the phone down on the edge of the recliner and stared blankly at Mason, his small chest rising and falling beneath the tangle of wires. His fingers were still curled the same way they'd been since the day of the accident, like he was holding onto something invisible, something only he could feel. I used to think my mother loved us both equally, just differently. Now I wasn't so sure she ever really saw me at all. When I was 7, I drew a picture of our family in crayon stick figures standing in front of our beige colonial in Lake Oswego. I gave myself a crown. My mother took one look and said, "Well, isn't that a bit arrogant?" Princess Rachel thinks the world revolves around her. That same year, Lindsay played a piano solo at her 3rd grade recital. Mom cried. I tripped during the school play and knocked over a cardboard tree. Mom scolded me all the way home. "You're just not as naturally graceful as your sister," she said, one hand gripping the steering wheel, the other waving me into silence. It didn't stop there. At my high school graduation, I wore the honor cords I worked so hard for. Diane took pictures, none with me alone. Lindsay, who didn't even go to that school, was the one she bragged about to every teacher in earshot. And when I graduated from Portland State University with a degree in social work, Diane pulled me aside just before the ceremony. She smoothed a wrinkle from my sleeve, looked me in the eye, and said, "This isn't a real degree, Rachel. Lindsay's from Stanford was the one that meant something. But, well done, I guess." I smiled that day, smiled for the pictures, smiled for the guests, smiled because I was used to performing, but something inside me chipped. I stood now in the hospital bathroom, gripping the edge of the sink, staring at my own reflection like it was a stranger. My hair was unwashed. My shirt had a stain from the vending machine coffee I spilled earlier. My eyes were red, not from crying, but from not having anything left to cry. I pressed my palms flat to the counter, then slid to the floor. I sobbed there silent and shaking until my breath came in sharp gasps and my fingers curled against the tile. And in the middle of all that, something inside me broke. Not a bad break, not like before, but like a release, like tearing off something that never fit right to begin with. I pulled my phone out again, sat up, hands trembling, and I opened my contacts, scrolled down to Mom, paused, took a breath, then pressed delete. The moment felt terrifying, but clean, like finally setting down a weight I'd carried so long I forgot what my own spine felt like without it. I rinsed my face with cold water, straightened up, and returned to Mason's room. He hadn't moved, not even a flicker. I sat beside him and placed my hand gently over his. "You don't owe anyone a performance," I whispered, "not even me." Then something happened, the slightest barely perceptible twitch. His pinky finger moved. I blinked, sat up, leaned in. Mason, nothing else. But that flicker like the hint of light before a sunrise was everything. I pressed the nurse call button with shaking fingers. Carla rushed in. "What is it? I think he moved." She came to his side, checked the machines, looked at the readings. "Could have been involuntary," she said gently. "Or it could be the beginning of something." She glanced at me, smiled faintly. "Either way, you were here to see it." I nodded, tears, now hot and fast. I'm always going to be here, because unlike the love I'd spent my whole life chasing, this love didn't need a schedule. I never thought the word swelling could both break me and give me hope. Dr. Lyman stood at the foot of Mason's bed, flipping through charts like they were lottery tickets, like one of them might hold the miracle we were waiting for. "There's still pressure around the frontal lobe," he said, eyes not meeting mine, "but compared to yesterday's scan, we're seeing a slight reduction in edema." I nodded slowly, not quite sure what that meant for today, only what it meant compared to yesterday. "Is he closer to waking up?" I asked. The doctor hesitated, then spoke carefully. "His brain is stabilizing. That's good, but recovery from a TBI isn't linear. We need patience and time. Time. It always came back to that, didn't it? Too much when you're waiting, not enough when you're scared. A gift, a weapon, a thief." I sat back down beside Mason, watching the soft rise and fall of his chest. He looked a little less pale, maybe. Or maybe I was imagining things clinging to any scrap of change like a drowning woman reaching for driftwood. Then there was a knock at the door. It cracked open, revealing a floral arrangement so large it practically waddled in on its own. Behind it, Tessa. Okay, she said, shoving it through. "I know hospital flowers are cliché, but these aren't from me. They're from the entire 7th grade homeroom. And, yes, I forced Mr. Duval to use the school budget for the vase." I blinked. "Wait, what?" She set the bouquet down beside Mason's monitor. Balloons poked out from the back. "Get well soon, we miss you. Come back, Robot King." A smile small and uncertain tugged at the corners of my mouth. I looked at the card, and sure enough, every kid had signed it. Sloppy ink? Doodles? One even drew Mason as a stick figure with laser eyes and the caption, "Too strong to stay down." I held the card close to my chest. "He'll love this when he sees it," I whispered. Tessa set her coffee down on the windowsill and slumped into the chair across from me. Her eyes scanned me gently but unflinching. "You're not okay," she said. "I don't think I have to be," I replied, voice thin. She leaned forward. "Good, because being okay is for people with yoga classes and 2-bedroom mortgages, not single moms camped out in ICU rooms. So, you get to feel whatever you feel." I looked away, and then, almost without thinking, I reached into my bag and pulled out a beat-up leather notebook, the same one I used to jot ideas in before I ever became a mother, before the world revolved around permission slips, insurance paperwork, and leftover chicken nuggets. I opened to a blank page and started writing. Day 4. Mason's still silent, but I swear I heard him breathing deeper. I haven't heard from Mom since the texts, and maybe that's a blessing in disguise. I paused, then kept writing. I've spent so much of my life apologizing for needing things, for having emotions, for not being my sister. And now sitting here, I realize the only thing I truly regret is ever believing I had to earn love. Tessa watched me quietly, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup. You needed this, she said gently. I don't even know what this is, I admitted. She smiled. It's you, Rach, unfiltered, undistracted, and no choosing Mason over the birthday circus doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you brave. A tear slid down my cheek before I could catch it. Then my phone buzzed. An email. I already knew who it was from. I opened it slowly, bracing myself. Subject line. Forgiveness is strength, not weakness. A message from Mom. The body of the email was long, almost poetic, filled with spiritual quotes, half from the Bible, half from Instagram. Stuff about letting go, honoring family, and choosing grace in the face of disappointment. And then came the dagger. It's not too late to be part of Lindsay's special night, but you'll need to stop making this all about you. God has a plan for everyone, including those who love too conditionally. My fingers hovered over the reply button, then stopped. I didn't need to respond, because for once I didn't feel small or wrong or desperate to justify my existence. I closed the email, and I picked up my pen. Choosing my son doesn't make me less of a daughter. It just means I finally chose myself, for once, and maybe, just maybe, that's what love's supposed to look like. Mason stirred in his sleep. Tessa stood to leave. I'll come back tomorrow. You need rest, and I need to talk to Mr. Duval about using school funds for edible arrangements. She grinned. You good? I looked at my son, my notebook, my silence. Then I nodded. I will be. I had turned my phone off 2 days ago, mostly out of survival, partly out of spite. But this morning, something told me to turn it back on. Maybe I was craving a normal distraction, a weather alert, a bank balance notification, an email about a sale I couldn't afford but would scroll through anyway. Instead, what I got was a flood, 37 unread messages, all from one place, the Carter family chat. I stared at the screen, thumb frozen. It had been a while since I looked in there. That group was usually a mix of wedding photos, forwarded prayer chain links, and the occasional passive-aggressive recipe suggestion from my aunt. But this was a barrage. Where are you, Lindsay's crying in the bathroom again? You said you'd help with the place cards. Mom is so disappointed. Honestly, Rachel, this is selfish. Family matters. I scrolled slower. Not a single message asked about Mason, not one. I could feel my throat tightening, a hot pressure building behind my eyes. And then I saw it. My cousin Becca, bless her heart, had posted a picture of the centerpiece arrangements, tulips and gold ribbon. It was captioned, "Still waiting for Rachel. We're missing one vase for the main table." One freaking vase. I stood up abruptly, the hospital recliner creaking beneath me. The nurse on call, Daniel, glanced over from the hallway. "You okay?" he asked gently. I nodded. "Just fine, family stuff." He nodded back, no questions asked. I returned to Mason's bedside. He was still out, still silent. But his heart monitor was steady like a lullaby I didn't know the words to anymore. I unlocked my phone again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't breathe, I just typed. "My son is in a coma. I will not be attending a birthday party. Stop texting me." Then I hit send. And the silence afterward, it was thunderous, for exactly 3 minutes. Then my phone blew up. "Diane, how dare you make this all about you, Lindsay? You could have just said no without ruining the mood. Uncle Jim, there's a time and place, Rachel. This ain't it. Aunt Grace, you used to be so considerate." I stared at the screen, my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. Considerate. That word echoed in my head like it had for years. When Mason was born, I was 22. Josh was already working 72-hour shifts at the firehouse. I was scared, exhausted, and broke. Diane had been present, sure, but not in any way that mattered. She walked into the hospital room with a designer scarf and a look of pure disapproval. "You're having him here. This place smells like antiseptic and cafeteria meatloaf." I'd just given birth, still bleeding, still shaking, and the first thing she said after meeting Mason, "I hope this doesn't interfere with Lindsay's law school graduation next month." Josh tried to say something to defend me, but I remember just turning away, holding Mason tighter to my chest like I could already feel the world trying to peel him away from me. Now sitting next to that same child, now older broken, still I felt the same impulse to shield him from their nonsense, to build a wall between us and them. I opened my notes app and started typing not messages this time. Something else. Something heavier. A will. I didn't even know what I was doing at first, but my fingers moved anyway. In the event of my death or incapacitation, legal guardianship of Mason Carter is to be given to... I paused. Josh was gone. My mother, out of the question, Lindsay. Please, I kept typing. Tessa Wilcox, pending legal review and background approval. She knows him. She loves him. She will protect him. The sentence stared back at me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt clarity. Pain comes in two forms, physical and emotional. And this emotional ache, this constant rejection, this isolation, this invisible leash I'd been tethered to since I was a child, it ends now. Because even if Mason never opened his eyes again, even if I never heard his voice say Mom one more time, I was going to make damn sure he knew even in silence that I chose him, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but out of love, the kind that doesn't have to be earned, and doesn't come with conditions. The sound of the chair scraping against the linoleum made me look up. At first I thought it was another nurse checking vitals, or maybe Carla with more tea and grace. But instead, it was him, my father, Tom Carter. He stood in the doorway of Mason's ICU room like a man who wasn't sure if he was invited in. He was wearing a faded flannel shirt, his weekend uniform. His hands, as always, were tucked in his jean pockets, like he needed to physically hold something in to keep from saying too much. "Hey, Rach," he said quietly. "Dad." I stood slowly unsure what came next, unsure if he was here as backup or an ambassador for my mother. He stepped in, nodding toward Mason. "I came to see my grandson," he said plainly, like it was the only thing that made sense in this mess of a world. I moved aside to give him room. He walked over to Mason, looked down, and exhaled a breath so heavy it cracked something in the silence. "He's a good kid," he murmured. The best I said voice, raw. Tom nodded. Then after a long pause, he spoke again, softer this time. "Your mom, she's always been this way." I didn't say anything, not because I disagreed, but because it was the first time he'd ever acknowledged it out loud. He glanced over at me, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded check. "Don't make this weird," he said, holding it out. "Dad, I know hospital bills. I know you won't ask for help. So just take it." No speeches. I looked down at it. It wasn't massive, but it was something. A gesture. A line drawn in the sand. I took the check. "Thanks," I whispered. He gave a small, tired smile. "You always took the hard road, Rachel, ever since you were a kid. Maybe I learned that from you," I said. He looked at me, then really looked, and I swear, for a moment I saw it. Regret, pride, the ache of a man who'd stood silent too long. "I should have stood up to her more," he finally said. "But I didn't, and I'm sorry." And just like that, somewhere deep inside, I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I was done carrying guilt that didn't belong to me. Later that evening, Mason's monitors began to shift. The nurses clustered in efficient, focused whispering, just loud enough for me to catch words like reducing sedation stimulus response and spontaneous eye movement. Carla placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "This is good, Rachel. His body's working. We'll go slow, but this is a real step forward." I closed my eyes, letting her words settle. For the first time since the accident, I let myself hope. I stayed with him, notebook on my lap, pen in hand. I wrote legacy is strange. We inherit blue eyes, crooked teeth, and sometimes emotional prisons. But today I'm breaking that chain. I don't remember falling asleep. I hadn't really slept in almost 5 days. But the weight of my father's visit, the flicker of Mason's progress, it wrapped around me like a warm hand on my back, and I drifted, until the phone rang, violent, shrill. I startled awake, heart pounding. Caller ID Diane. I stared at it, then answered. Her voice came through cold, clipped, the way someone might order a salad with dressing on the side. I hope you're rested, Rachel, she began, because I've decided if you don't come to the party today, I'm changing my will. Silence. Then my voice steady but low. You're what you heard me. This behavior, this selfishness, I've had enough. I won't be manipulated by emotional stunts. You want to cut ties, fine, but don't expect anything from me. I blinked, trying to process what I was hearing. Mom, Mason is in a coma, and Lindsay is turning 30. Milestones matter. My hand gripped the phone tighter. I'm not coming to the party, I said. And if your love can be revoked with a signature, it was never love to begin with. Rachel. I hung up, just like that. And this time, it didn't shatter me. This time, it freed me. I looked at Mason, his lips twitching slightly in his sleep, as if he were chasing something warm in a dream. And I whispered almost to myself, no more guilt, buddy. Not for me, not for you. It ends here. The moment I hung up, I felt it. Not relief, not guilt, but something raw, like tearing off a bandage you didn't know had fused with your skin. The silence after that call wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. My pulse thudded in my ears and my breath came short and sharp like my body couldn't quite believe I had actually done it. I hung up on my mother. Not just the call, the power, the history, the myth of her voice in my head. I stared at the phone half expecting it to ring again, some explosion, some threat. But it didn't. Just stillness. And for the first time, that stillness didn't terrify me. It cracked something open. A memory crept in uninvited. Josh and I were supposed to fly to Costa Rica for our honeymoon. It was our first real trip together. I'd bought a red bikini and a travel journal. He booked us a zipline tour. We were so ready to escape our small apartment, our jobs, the weight of planning a wedding with zero family help. And then, Diane called. Diane. She had a cold, not the flu, not pneumonia, just congestion and a little fever. But the voice on the other end of the phone, that was the guilt orchestra. I just didn't expect to feel this abandoned so soon after the wedding. You're off sipping pina coladas while I'm here, barely able to breathe. I canceled the trip that night. Josh didn't argue. He just sighed, then held me as I cried myself into sleep, telling him it was the right thing to do. I still remember his words. You're not her daughter. You're her hostage. At the time, I laughed too sharp, too quick. Now I know he was right. The next afternoon, Elena Mason's night nurse brought me tea and sat with me during a quiet hour. She was younger than me, maybe 28. Sharp brown eyes, calm hands, the kind of person who could silence a room just by standing in it. You look like someone who just cut a lifeline, she said gently. I blinked at her, then let out a half laugh, more like a rope that was strangling me. She nodded unsurprised. My mom used to do that too. I looked over at her. Elena tucked her hair behind her ear. I missed my college interview because she told me her car battery died, 3 states away. She just wanted attention. I finally moved without telling her where. Do you regret it? I asked. No, she said. I regret every year I waited to do it. I swallowed hard. It felt like she was peeling the words right out of my chest. I've spent so long apologizing for existing, I whispered, for having feelings, for not being Lindsay. Elena tilted her head. You're not alone, Rachel. There are more of us than you think. Women who carry these invisible burdens, expectations that never belonged to us in the first place. I looked down at the notebook in my lap. Then I started writing, not in my journal this time, but in a letter, one I didn't intend to send. Dear Mom, here's everything I wish you'd said to me. You are enough. You don't owe anyone your peace. Your worth is not tied to how well you serve others. You're not selfish for setting boundaries. You're brave. I'm sorry I made you feel small. I love you not because you bend, but because you stand. I stared at the page, eyes burning. I didn't need her to read it. I just needed it out. Elena placed a soft hand on my shoulder. Whatever you lost, you're making space for something better. I nodded slowly. Outside the sun was setting behind the clouds, muted soft, like it was apologizing for being late. Mason stirred in his bed, fingers twitching again. And in that room full of beeps and hope, I felt it. Not peace, not yet, but the beginning of it. Outside the hospital, my family was probably raising their champagne glasses, smiling for the group selfie, Lindsay beaming in her new designer dress, hand on hip cake knife posed like a coronation. And inside room 314, I was counting heartbeats, Mason's, mine, the monitors, all synced, all quiet, all waiting. I had just finished scribbling the words "maybe tomorrow" in my journal when it happened. It was so small I almost missed it. His fingers twitched. I froze, unsure if I'd imagined it again. I leaned forward, placing my hand gently over his. Then his eyelids fluttered. My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled as I reached for the call button, but before I could press it, his lips parted, and I heard it. A rasp, barely a whisper, but it was mine. Mom. The world stopped. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. All the air rushed from my lungs and filled the space between us like liquid gold. Tears spilled down my cheeks suddenly, all at once, no warning, no control. I gripped his hand, nodding frantically, crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, yes, baby, I'm here, I'm right here. Oh my God, I'm here. The nurses rushed in, Elena leading the charge. One of them clapped her hands over her mouth in joy. The others started checking vitals machines tubes, but I barely heard them. All I saw was him. Mason's eyes blinked slowly, unfocused, his lips dry, his face pale and soft. He looked at me and somehow smiled, that crooked little grin that always came when he told me a joke I didn't quite get. Hi, he croaked like he'd been sleeping for 1,000 years. I leaned in, kissed his forehead. You gave me the strength to finally choose us, I whispered. He blinked again, confused but still smiling. I called Tom. He answered after the second ring. Rach, he's awake. A beat, then silence, followed by a deep trembling exhale. Thank God. Thank God. I'm coming now, I nodded. Just you. He understood. I didn't call Diane. I didn't even think about it. Later that evening, after Mason drifted back into a light healing sleep, I sat beside him in the dark room. The machines beeped softer somehow, like they knew they didn't have to shout anymore. And then my phone buzzed. I didn't want to check it. I already knew, but I did. Text from Diane. We heard Mason's awake. Can we stop by tomorrow with gifts? No apology. No, how are you holding up? Just presentation. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I locked the phone and placed it face down. No reply. Not now. Not ever, maybe. Mason stirred again, mumbling something about the light, his voice distant but alive. And as I curled into the hospital chair, pulling the blanket over my knees, I whispered, we don't need balloons or cake. This is the miracle. Because miracles don't RSVP. They don't need confetti or witnesses or a theme. They just arrive quietly, powerfully, and they change everything. The morning sun barely crept through the slatted blinds of Mason's ICU room. I was halfway through feeding him spoonfuls of watered-down applesauce when I heard it, the click of heels. I didn't even have to turn around. I knew, the low murmur of a nurse at the front desk, the overly sweet voice laced with entitlement, the distinct rustle of tissue paper inside a boutique gift bag, and then a knock. Sharp, measured, fake polite. I stood slowly placing the cup on the tray beside Mason's bed. He looked up at me, sleepy but aware. Stay here, sweetheart, I said softly. Then I walked to the door and opened it just wide enough to confirm what I already knew. Diane, in a tailored cream coat, holding a large balloon that read, "Get well soon, sport," like she bought it at the last second on her way in. And beside her, Lindsay dressed like she was heading to brunch, not a hospital. Hair curled, lip gloss shining. I stepped into the hallway and pulled the door shut behind me, blocking their view. Diane's smile didn't reach her eyes. Well, someone looks like they got some sleep. I did, I said flatly. Not that you asked how he's doing. Diane exhaled through her nose. We heard Mason was awake. We wanted to see him. I folded my arms. You heard he was awake because someone else told you, not because you cared enough to be here before. Lindsay huffed. Rachel, stop making this so dramatic. Mom's trying to be nice. This isn't about being nice, I snapped. This is about boundaries. You don't get to show up now with balloons and gift bags and pretend this didn't happen. You weren't here. Diane's eyes narrowed. This isn't about you, Rachel. No, I said, voice rising. It's about my son. It's always been about him, and you both of you made it about a birthday party, about image, about control. She lowered the balloon slowly, eyes flashing. You've used money, guilt, and shame as weapons your whole life, I said, breath trembling, and I finally put down my armor. I'm not doing it anymore. I gave you everything, Diane hissed. We paid for your first apartment. We covered the down payment on your car. Because you wanted control, I cut in. Not love. Never love. Behind me, I heard a faint voice. Mom. I turned, cracked the door open just enough. Mason sat up slightly, his hair messy, his eyes still hazy from sedation, but wide. Is Grandma mad again? He asked, voice thin. My heart cracked. I looked back at Diane. Her expression faltered for the first time just a second. Then she straightened. I slipped inside and closed the door gently behind me, sealing her out. I sat beside Mason's bed and brushed a hand through his hair. She's not mad, I whispered. Just not ready to understand yet. Mason looked confused, but nodded. A knock came again. Then a Nurse Elena peeked in her face, firm but kind. Visitors are limited to immediate medical contacts, she said calmly. I've asked them to leave. I nodded, mouthing a silent thank you. Diane and Lindsay were gone when I glanced back through the window. The balloon had been left behind, tied to a chair in the hallway. It bobbed in the filtered sunlight, mocking and hollow. I turned back to Mason. He gave me a weak thumbs up. That applesauce was gross. I laughed through my tears, leaned in and kissed his cheek. I'm sorry you heard that, I said. He shrugged. It's okay. I know you got my back. And there it was, the only approval I ever needed, not from a will, not from a party, from the boy who called me Mom. And in that moment I knew the war was over. I'd already won. The morning light filtered through the high hospital windows, casting soft golden streaks across the white walls. For the first time in weeks, the beep of monitors no longer sounded like a countdown, but a heartbeat, a beginning. Mason was sitting up now, shoulders hunched forward but eyes alert. He wore a faded gray hoodie from home sleeves pushed up around his elbows, one sock halfway off his foot. He looked like a kid again, not a patient. The physical therapist, a gentle man named Jeremy, with kind eyes and surfer hair, helped him into the wheelchair with practiced patience. Mason gritted his teeth and cracked a small joke as Jeremy adjusted the footrests. Do I at least get a license plate for this thing? He mumbled. I smiled, brushing hair off his forehead. Jeremy laughed. Only if you beat me in a hallway race. We made our way to the courtyard just beyond the glass doors of the pediatric wing. It wasn't big, just a few benches, a struggling tree, and some raised flower beds with wilted tulips. But to us, it might as well have been Eden. Mason breathed in the fresh air, tilting his head toward the sun. I dreamed you never left, he said suddenly. I turned to him, startled. When I was asleep, he added, it felt like weeks, but you were always there, even when it was dark. Tears stung behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. I knelt beside the chair, resting my hand on his arm. I never left, I whispered. Not for 1 second. He nodded, voice quiet. I know. We sat there for a while in the breeze. A nurse wheeled out a small cart with lemonade. Mason reached for the cup with shaky hands, spilled a few drops, and grinned. Oops, I handed him a napkin, still smoother than Grandma's Thanksgiving gravy. That got a laugh, a real one. He leaned back in the chair, eyes closed. Do you think Dad would have liked who I'm becoming? The question hit me square in the chest. I took a breath, steadied myself. He would have loved it, I said, because it's you, not some version of what people want you to be, just you. He looked at me, eyes serious, like you're starting to be too. I froze, then I smiled. Exactly like that. Back in the room, I noticed the gift bag still sitting in the corner. Pink tissue paper gold ribbon, the card on top unopened. From Diane. I didn't need to look inside. I picked it up slowly, walked it down the hall, and dropped it straight into the trash bin beside the vending machine. No second guessing, no guilt. It wasn't a rejection. It was a release. Later that afternoon, I sat beside Mason as he dozed again. The hospital cafeteria's speaker crackled as it always did, announcing a lunch special that no one ever wanted. "Tuna casserole again," I muttered under my breath. He stirred opened one eye and smirked. Cruel and unusual punishment. I let out a surprised laugh, loud, real, echoing slightly in the sterile room. For a moment it was just that me and my son laughing at something stupid, something normal. And in that silly little laugh I found it, the real birthday gift. Not the party, not the cake, but this. A second chance, a rebirth not just for him, but for me. Because family isn't who shows up with balloons after the battle's won. It's who holds your hand when you're losing. And today I held his, and he held mine right back. The moment we stepped back into the apartment, I realized something strange. Everything was in the same place, but nothing felt familiar. The throw blanket still hung over the back of the couch. The fridge still hummed like always. Mason's sneakers were still kicked under the entryway table, just as he'd left them weeks ago. But the air, it was different. It felt like coming home to a house someone else had lived in for years. Mason clutched the walker with both hands, shuffling slowly into the living room. His movements were careful, deliberate, and it made my chest ache in ways I didn't have language for. He looked around, then said softly, "I forgot how it smelled in here." I chuckled, though there was a lump in my throat. Like toast and laundry detergent, he smiled. I missed it. We didn't talk much that first afternoon. I helped him into bed, propped him up with pillows, and set a bell on the nightstand, even though he insisted it was ridiculous and medieval. Still, I kept it there. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table in the glow of the microwave clock, staring at the balance in my checking account. It didn't lie. The hospital stay, the medications, the therapies to come, everything that wasn't covered had carved a canyon through our finances. And then there was the email from Diane, short, formal, and final. She'd revoked Mason's college trust, said it was for the best, given the strained circumstances. I didn't cry, I just closed the laptop and opened a new tab. Local tutoring gigs, evenings, weekends, remote if possible. I'd find a way. I always had. The next morning, as I scrambled some eggs, Mason sat quietly at the counter watching me. He spoke without looking up. "We don't need Grandma's money, right?" I paused. My instinct was to reassure, to protect, to lie just a little, but I didn't. Instead, I turned to him and nodded. "No, we don't," even though my stomach flipped. Even though the rent was due in 12 days and the car's brakes were starting to squeak, he nodded back satisfied. Good. Later that week, I kept my appointment with the therapist the hospital had referred me to. Her name was Mia. Mid-40s, wore chunky jewelry and mismatched socks. I liked her immediately. Our first session was awkward. I talked around things, around Diane, around my exhaustion, around the echoing emptiness that followed me even in the shower. But then, halfway through the hour, I said it. I don't know how to live without trying to earn love. And just like that, something cracked. Not a sob, not a breakdown, just a quiet exhale I hadn't realized I'd been holding since childhood. Mia leaned forward gently. That's where we start. The next day, Tessa dropped by with a tote bag slung over her shoulder and a grin on her face. "I brought you something." She pulled out a worn leather case, familiar, scratched, and impossibly sentimental. My old camera. The one I'd pawned 4 years ago when Mason needed an emergency dental procedure and Diane told me to be resourceful. I blinked. How? "You pawned it at Hank's on 7th, she said, smirking. I called in a favor. "Tessa, Nope, she cut me off placing it on the table. You need to create again. Not for likes, not for approval, just for you." That night after Mason fell asleep with his science book open on his chest, I dusted off the camera. It clicked when I powered it on soft, sturdy Alive. I walked onto our little balcony and snapped a picture of the empty chair facing west, the last light of sunset bleeding across the sky. It wasn't award-winning, it wasn't marketable, but it was mine. The next morning, I photographed Mason brushing his teeth with one hand and holding a spoon in the other. Later, his lopsided science project Volcano of Doom, complete with glitter lava. And that afternoon, a single beam of light hitting the corner of our kitchen sink, where an orange peeled itself open just enough to catch it. No filters, no captions, no hashtags, just Moments. Hours. For once, I wasn't documenting to prove something. I wasn't performing for anyone. And in that stillness, I began to heal. Not in grand sweeping gestures, but in eggs scrambled just right. In Mason's half laugh at my bad hospital jokes. In a camera lens rediscovered. Rebuilding without blueprints meant I'd stumble. But step by step we were writing new plans. Together. A gentle breeze rolled through the backyard, rustling paper plates and making the plastic tablecloth flutter like a heartbeat. Sunlight filtered through the branches of the old oak tree that had shaded us since Mason was 5. There were no balloon arches, no ice sculptures, no matching family shirts with glitter letters. Just laughter, real loud unpolished laughter. Mason stood by the picnic table holding a cupcake in one hand and his balance in the other. No walker, no wheelchair, just him wobbly, steady, proud. Okay, he said, raising a hand. I have a thing to say. The group quieted Tessa and her fiancé Jake's parents from the bike group Elena in her casual weekend scrubs, and my dad Tom holding a coffee cup and blinking fast behind his glasses. Mason cleared his throat. His voice was a little hoarse, but he didn't hide it. This year was hard, he said. Like, superhero-level hard. Everyone chuckled, but he stayed serious. I couldn't walk for a while. Couldn't talk much. There were days I thought, maybe I wouldn't come back at all. But I did, and I didn't do it alone. He looked at me, eyes warm, steady older than they should have been. My mom never gave up on me, even when other people did. I covered my mouth, but the tears slipped through my fingers anyway. Elena sniffled. Jake's mom rubbed her husband's arm. Tessa just kept nodding, eyes glossy. Mason smiled, crooked and windblown. So, thanks, all of you, for being my people. Tom stepped forward and handed him a gift, just a small box wrapped in brown paper. Mason opened it carefully. Inside was a compass, old brass and well-loved. This belonged to my dad, Tom said, voice shaking. It always helped me find my way home. Mason clutched it tight. Thanks, Grandpa. That night, after everyone left and the sun had dipped low, I found myself on the porch with a blanket and my camera in my lap. I had taken dozens of photos that day, Mason hugging his friends, Elena, helping him light the candles, Tessa trying to pop open a cheap bottle of sparkling juice and nearly taking out a lawn chair. But one photo stood out. Mason hair wild from the wind eyes closed mid-wish, the candlelight dancing on his cheeks. That was the one I uploaded. Just one. No filters, no hashtags, just a caption. Some things are worth fighting for. The next day an envelope arrived in the mail. Diane's handwriting. Neat, cold. I opened it halfway. It began with a list things I should be grateful for. That was enough. I tossed it in the trash before I even reached the signature. Later that evening, Mason asked, "Are we ever going to see them again?" I looked at him for a long moment. Maybe, I said, but only if it's healthy. Family isn't just who shares your DNA. It's who shows up, without needing anything in return. Mason nodded slowly. Like everyone who came to my birthday, I smiled. Exactly. That's the family we choose. We sat there in silence, him tracing the compass with his thumb, me staring at the last orange ribbon of daylight. No more pretending, no more performing, just us. And that was enough. Actually, it was everything. They say life doesn't come with a manual, but sometimes it hands you a moment that rewrites everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and what family really means. This year, this journey taught me something I wish I'd known decades ago. You don't have to earn the right to be loved. Love that's real doesn't come with conditions, deadlines, or ultimatums. It shows up when you're at your worst. It sits quietly beside you when words aren't enough. It never demands that you prove your worth. I spent years trying to shrink myself to fit into someone else's expectations. But standing beside my son, watching him find strength I didn't know he had, I realized maybe healing isn't about fixing everything. Maybe it's about finally choosing yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. So now I'll ask you, have you ever had to walk away from someone to finally come back to yourself? Or are you still holding on to people who only show up when they need something? Let me know in the comments. I truly want to hear your thoughts. And if this story made you feel something or reminded you of your own battles, I hope you'll stick around. If you like stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. Your journey matters and you're not alone.